This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
You know, if you ever look at the world today and just think, what on earth is going on? Well, you're not alone. And to really get a handle on all the chaos and confusion, we've got to rewind the clock. Not that far, just about 35 years. Because one single event back in 1989, it set the stage for, well, for everything. And it all kicks off right here, November 9th, 1989. The Berlin Wall comes tumbling down. And yeah, we all know the images, right? People celebrating, this huge moment for freedom, the Cold War finally coming to an end. But here's the thing, what really happened that day was so much bigger than just a wall. See, what actually crumbled to the ground that night wasn't just concrete and barbed wire. It was a story, a huge one, maybe the last great story that gave the entire 20th century a sense of meaning and direction. Marxism. Think about it. It was this complete all-in-one explanation for everything in history, with a guaranteed happy ending. It was kind of like a theology that dressed itself up as science. And when that wall fell, poof, the story was just gone. And just like that, it was like the intellectual gravity holding our world together just switched off. We could still explain how things worked, sure, but the why, the deeper meaning behind it all, that was no longer guaranteed. We were all just left kind of floating, intellectually unmoored, adrift in this big, silent void. So, into this massive vacuum, who stepped up, right? Who was brave enough to try and draw a new map for us, to tell us a new story? Let's do a real quick flyby of 10 major thinkers who gave it a shot. But, spoiler alert, none of them really came up with the complete, satisfying answer we were all looking for. Okay, first up, you've got Jean Baudrillard, and his take was pretty grim. He basically said, hey everyone, in this world saturated with media, reality isn't even real anymore. It's just a simulation. He absolutely nailed the problem, that meaning had collapsed. But when it came to a solution, he offered nothing. Crickets. Then you have Francis Fukuyama, who came in with this super optimistic and super famous prediction. He said, that's it folks, we're done. History, with a capital H, is over. His idea was that liberal democracy was the final stop, the end of the line for all of humanity. But, well, let's just say history wasn't quite finished with us yet. And swinging in the complete opposite direction was Samuel Huntington. He was like, no, we are not all going to hold hands. He predicted the world would actually fracture, breaking apart along these big cultural fault lines. So meaning wouldn't be something we'd all share, it would be something we'd fight over. Judith Butler then took that whole idea of fragmentation and turned it inward, looking at us as individuals. They argue that the things we think are solid about ourselves, our core identities like gender, are actually constructed by society. Now, on one hand, that's incredibly empowering, right? It turns meaning into a personal choice, but it also makes that meaning radically unstable. Then you've got Bruno Latour, who decided to go after the last sacred cow in the room, science with a capital S. He showed that even science isn't this pure, objective truth that just gets handed down from on high. Nope, it's messy. It's a product of people, of networks, of arguments in labs. It's human. Fast forward a bit, and we get Yuval Noah Harari. He masterfully explained all of human history with one simple, powerful idea. We're the storytelling animal. That's our superpower. But then, when you get to the end of his work and ask, okay, so what story should we believe now? He basically just shrugs. Nick Bostrom looked past all this and into the future. And he came back with a chilling warning. He said, the biggest problem isn't a lack of meaning. It's about not losing control to a super intelligent AI. Suddenly, the search for meaning doesn't seem quite so important when you're worried about basic survival. And finally, there's Byung-Chul Han, who came in with this totally mind-bending idea. Maybe our problem isn't a lack of meaning, maybe it's an overdose. In this society where everything is visible and online, we're constantly performing, always being rated, it's exhausting. We're drowning in a sea of shallow, tiny meanings, with no deep current, no real story to hold on to. So let's just pause for a second. What's the big takeaway from that whirlwind tour? Did you notice the one thing that was missing? Not a single one of those brilliant people offered up a new, big, unifying story of salvation or progress. The era of someone just giving us the answer, it was well and truly over. And that leaves us with this kind of staggering realization. All those big ideas we build our societies on, freedom, equality, human rights. Guess what? They're not like gravity. They aren't laws of physics. They are stories. Incredibly powerful stories, for sure, but they only work because we all agree to believe in them together. And this is the perfect example of what that means in the real world. You look at Europe, and its shared story is built around the idea of individual freedom. That's priority number one. Then you look at China, and the story is built around social stability. Priority number one. Now, can science prove which one is better or correct? Nope. They are just fundamentally different design choices. So what this means is that we're now faced with a series of really fundamental design choices. And here's the kicker. You can't have it all. Every single choice involves a trade-off. Do you want more safety? Okay, that might mean less individual freedom. Do you want maximum economic growth? That might come at the cost of long-term sustainability. A super strong state or super strong citizens? You gotta choose. And at that point, this whole thing stops being some dusty academic debate. It becomes a deeply personal design problem for every single one of us. And science can't give you the answer. There's no formula. It's up to you. What kind of world are you trying to build for the next generation? Okay, so if we're all designers now, how do we actually do this without falling into the old traps? Well, that leads to this really cool way of thinking about the whole thing. What if society is like an operating system? And this contrast really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The big problems of the 20th century were often caused by stories that were too rigid, too absolute, demanding total belief. Believe this or else. But our confusion today comes from the complete opposite problem, a void, an absence of any story at all. So, if our stories are now based on agreement, we don't need another sacred text written in stone. We need a better process, a system, really, with 4 key parts. First, you have to make the choices and their trade-offs totally clear and visible to everyone. Second, you gotta let people actually participate in making the choice. Third, and this is crucial, the story has to be updatable as we learn more. And fourth, we all have to agree on the core values, the basic parameters that guide the whole system. Thinking about it this way just reframes the whole conversation. Society isn't some fixed, finished product handed down to us like an ancient artifact we can't touch. It's more like an operating system, an OS that we can and must constantly debug, patch, and upgrade together. But you know how every OS comes with default programs? The software that just runs in the background whether you like it or not? Well, after 1989, one system became the global default, capitalism. It stopped being a story about growth and progress. It just became the setting. It's not really one ideology competing with others anymore. It's the global infrastructure, the plumbing for how we exchange value. And while it claims to be morally neutral, it has started to build its own value system right into the platform. And that core value is evaluation. Trust becomes a credit score. Reputation becomes a star rating. Sincerity is measured in likes. The system quietly encourages us to act morally, but for our own selfish benefit. So all of this, the fall of the wall, the search for meaning, this idea of society as an OS, it all brings us to one final and most important takeaway. The world really shifted in 1989. We went from an era where we thought there was a final answer just waiting to be discovered, to today, where we understand that the responsibility for asking the right questions and for designing the answers is entirely our own. So the ultimate question for our time is no longer, what is the one true story? It's this: who gets to be the designer of our shared story, and what process will we use to decide it together? The answers are no longer written in a book or guaranteed by history. We are standing back in that world without gravity, but this time, we're holding the tools of design in our own hands. The story of what comes next is up to us.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.